Coming up on Network Africa. Ukraine opens hotline for Africans fleeing the war. Africa split as UN vote on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Plus, former ICC prosecutor for Sudan to head Ethiopia war probe. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. The Ukrainian government has launched an emergency hotline for Africans and Asians fleeing Russia's invasion. It follows widespread allegations of racism faced by Africans attempting to leave the country. Numerous African students in Ukraine have shared stories of being blocked by Ukrainian security agents from leaving the country. In a tweet, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said authorities are working intensively to ensure the safety and passage of African and Asian students. The emergency hotline number is +380 9341 85684. In the meantime, over 900 Nigerians that fled Ukraine following the escalating crisis with Russia are expected in the country. Nigeria's major airlines, MaxAir and Air Peace, have concluded arrangements to conduct the evacuation flights of Nigerians from Poland and Romania. Air Peace said it deployed its aircraft to Warsaw, Poland, in the early hours of the day, while MaxAir landed at the airport in Romania with some Nigerian officials on board. Earlier, Channels Television spoke with the chairman, House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Yusuf Buba, who is part of the delegation, for an update.
About 95% of the first batch that we met with this morning are students. And from there, we also went to the hotel, where some other students are being accommodated, and we had chats with them. But today, about 600 will be evacuated back to Nigeria. So immediately the flight lands, the students will start boarding, and they will be taken back home. While the ministry has also made arrangements for students that are in Hungary, in Poland, and I think by tomorrow, other flights will move in to continue the evacuation of the remaining students. And this will be an ongoing process until all students are evacuated back home to safety.
Well, Nigeria, along with 140 countries, have voted to demand the immediate withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. The United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted a resolution deploring Russia's invasion of its neighbor. It represents a powerful rebuke of Moscow's invasion by most of the world's nations. However, African diplomats were divided at the UN General Assembly. Eritrea was one of only 5 countries in the world that voted against the resolution in the rare emergency session following more than 2 days of debate. Out of 54 nations on the continent, 28 voted in favor, but a large chunk, 17 countries, abstained from the vote. 8 countries, including 2 that have recently witnessed coups, Burkina Faso and Guinea, did not vote at all. Ethiopia, where a civil war has raged since November 2020, also did not vote. Security and global affairs analyst Confidence McCarry joins us now for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me on today.
Are you surprised about the divisions seen in the way African countries voted at the UN General Assembly?
Yeah, well, it's not the first time that we're having such divisions. although I cannot really recall the last time this one happened. This treat has been that Africa has presented united fronts in voting at the United Nations General Assembly. So this is exactly why one of Russia's expansion into Africa, resurgence into Africa, was part of it to quarrel votes in the United Nations Security Council. But for the countries who voted against the adoption of the resolution to condemn Russia's action in Ukraine, Eritrea being one of them, it's actually understandable. Eritrea joined Ethiopia to launch the Ethiopian government to launch an attack on this region of Tigray sometime in 2020, and there are concerns that Russian influence is enough to blame for the Ethiopian government's action, in the sense that the West has basically abandoned the Ethiopian government, which has driven it into the arms of the East, which of course is Russia and China. So it's very, very understandable for the Eritrea to vote the same way it did. And for the countries that have abstained, it follows a pattern of Russia's diplomatic victory on the continent, in that it's scoring rewards from a lot of African governments. But obviously from the results of the voting process, you could see that the results have been mixed. So the Russian government, if it returns to the continent after the conflict in Ukraine, that is what got out for it.
And, you know, in terms of what actions African leaders can take against Russia, how do you think, you know, they should handle this crisis? Or is there not really much they can do?
Yeah, there's such a feeling that there's nothing much to do, but from my own perspective, I think the best course of action is neutrality. We already had the non-aligned policy leading as far back as the Cold War. In this particular conflict, Africa has no skin in the game apart from the evacuation of its students that are studying there. And so the best form of action is to call for a ceasefire and then basically abstain from the conflict. And if push comes to shove, and the parties to the conflict are looking for alternative markets, Africa can actually fill that particular space and close up due to sanctions. Because it makes little or no strategic and geopolitical sense for any African country that is not totally indebted to any party to the conflict to take the strategic position of support for either Ukraine or for Russia. So I think for us down here, it's to evaluate what our strategic options are and choose the best course of action, which is actually strategic neutrality.
And what other implications are there, would you say, for Africa with this conflict with Ukraine? What implications does it have for the continent?
Yeah, it impacts a lot. In terms of trade, Russia-Africa trade is currently at $2 billion. That's from 2020. Yes, of course, you could see that it pales in comparison to what China does at about 176 billion US dollars. But I think due to the efforts of Vladimir Putin in reshaping the Russian engagement with Africa, which started from the Russian-Africa summit in 2019, of course, we're supposed to have the second one this year. I think Africa needs to assess its priorities and then to offer itself as an alternative source of markets, for a lot of the parties to the conflict. It's going to be, we are going into a decade where we are well into a decade rather where a lot of things have changed. The rules-based international order, as we've seen it or as we've known it, is strategically changing, and the world is going bipolar. There is a deep bipolarization of the world between East and West. Africa's place currently, right now, does not necessarily lie with one, which is the West, which they ruled practically all their lives because of colonialism. And it certainly does not lie in the East, which the West have been warning them of a second form of colonialism. So I think it is better to reassess our priorities and to serve as an important market for both the East and the West in the coming geopolitical shift that we're going to be seeing in this decade.
All right, then, Security and Global Affairs Analyst Confidence McCarry, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And to other stories now, the UN Human Rights Council has appointed Fatou Bensouda, a former International Criminal Court prosecutor and Gambian lawyer, to head a team that will probe alleged violations during the conflict in Ethiopia. The team will have two other international experts, Kenyan lawyer Kari Betty Murungi and Stephen Ratner of the United States. They will serve on the newly created International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. The UN rights body agreed last December to send international investigators to Ethiopia, where the federal troops and rebels have been fighting. The commission was handed a one-year renewable mandate to impartially investigate allegations of violations and abuses committed by all sides in the conflict. Guinea's opposition is threatened to hold demonstrations against the country's transitional authorities over poor management. The opposition group, National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, wants clarity on who is part of the junta and the duration of the transition to civilian rule. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya seized power in September, deposing Alpha Condé as president. A recently leaked document suggested there would be a 4-year transition, but the authorities have not commented on it. Sudan is once again lurching towards economic collapse in the aftermath of a coup in October, with exports plummeting more than 80% in January, and that's according to the central bank data, and the currency sliding on the black market. A military-led government is raising prices and taxes on everything from healthcare to cooking gas, but increases have angered struggling citizens.
Sudan is once again drifting towards an economic collapse following a coup in October, with exports plummeting more than 85% in January, according to central bank data. Cut off from billions in foreign assistance, the military-led government is raising prices for everything from cooking gas to healthcare. Last month, in a move that was subsequently suspended, the cost of admission to healthcare facilities went from 250 Sudanese pounds, or around half a US dollar, to 4,200 overnight. That's according to Dr. Ali Shakir, head of one of the country's largest public hospitals.
We were surprised that they were asking us for money that we need from citizens' pockets, whom we know for sure that they have nothing. The patients cannot even afford 250 Sudanese pounds, which is about 50 cents, for the patient's file fee. Based on the old prices, we have this for them. It was raised to 4,200 pounds. Patients say they cannot afford this.
Sudan's ruling council said in a statement that prices will be reviewed and that the government did not consider healthcare a revenue earner. But the country faces a precarious economic picture.
These increases will really harm the Sudanese citizen. One surgery cost around £600, which is a very small number within this economic crisis. And we still make price reductions and cancel many fees. Some people take their patients home because they cannot afford it. We urge the government to reconsider this and study it better, because the money in the Sudanese citizens' pockets will be hardly enough for food, drink, and fuel, so we cannot add the additional burden of health.
Inflation has eased slightly, but remains at one of the highest rates worldwide, at 260% in January.
The country is difficult. The government is difficult. I am not scared. Since Chief Abdurrahman came to power, life has become really, really terrible. The bakery sells a piece of bread as big as a marble and say it's 30 Sudanese pounds.
Following the devaluation of Sudan's currency a year ago, the exchange rate had stabilized at about 450 pounds to the dollar. In recent weeks, the black market has resurfaced, and the pound was changing hands at 530 against the dollar on Wednesday, compared with an official rate of 443.50.
Still to come on the program. Mozambique's president sacks 6 ministers in cabinet reshuffle. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi has sacked 6 ministers including that of the finance, in a major reshuffle. The announcement was made in a statement that did not offer any reason for the dismissal of the ministers or give indications of when the positions would be filled. It's the second major reorganization of the cabinet in recent months. Others sacked included the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries and Public Works, Housing and Water Resources. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse decades of progress made towards gender equality. As according to Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa, who says existing gender inequalities have deepened due to the pandemic, and women have been hit much harder socially and economically than men. She calls on African governments to take actions to protect gains made over the years.
As WHO in Africa, we urge African countries, donors and partners to dig deep to make the kinds of investments necessary to strengthen health systems. To protect women's access now into the future, these systems need to be capable of withstanding future shocks while maintaining delivery of primary health care. And gender inequity as a determinant needs to be woven into the design and delivery of interventions to improve health. Investing in women's economic participation, livelihoods, and health is an investment in the health of future generations of Africans. Our continent cannot afford any further reversals of the fragile gains made in pursuit of equitable care for women and girls. This is a ticking time bomb, complicated by Africa's double burden of growing obesity and severe malnutrition. Both of them need to be addressed at the same time through universal access to effective nutrition, which in turn requires sustainable and resilient food systems. So while COVID-19 continues to demand much of our attention, we must strengthen the response to Africa's many other pressing health issues while prioritizing women's empowerment, engagement, and health. I look forward very much to our discussions today, and thank you again for having joined us.
Meanwhile, WHO's chief, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says while it's encouraging to see the number of deaths from the COVID-19 pandemic declining globally, it's too early to declare victory.
Many countries have passed their...
It's encouraging to see that deaths from COVID-19 are now declining globally and in most regions. And it's pleasing to see some countries being able to relax restrictions without their health systems being overwhelmed. But it's far too early to declare victory over COVID-19. There are still many countries with high rates of hospitalization and death and low rates of vaccine coverage. And with high transmission, the threat of a new and more dangerous variant remains very real. We continue to urge all people in all countries to exercise caution, and we urge all governments to support their people to protect themselves and others. Our review found that females were more affected than males, and younger people, especially those aged between 20 and 24, were more affected than older adults. This increase in the prevalence of mental health problems coincided with severe disruptions to mental health services and underscored chronic underinvestment in mental health, leaving huge gaps in care for those who need it most.
Building a green, inclusive and resilient Africa to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 is the focus of the ongoing 8th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development in Kigali, the Rwandan capital. The annual forum, which brings together government officials, the academia, civil society and UN organizations, undertakes integrated follow-up and review of the Sustainable Development Goals and that of Agenda 2063. Our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, who is in Kigali, now reports.
The devastating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, slowing economic growth, rising debt levels, and rising inflation are all the challenges currently facing the African continent. And the question is, when will African leaders rise to solve these problems?
For the achievement of the SDGs.
Delegates here at the Rwandan capital are working at providing answers to this question. They say for the continent to achieve its potential in terms of industrialization and trade, the African Continental Free Trade Area must be made to benefit all.
Up to now, I'm not sure there is a rules of origin in place. Now, you cannot trade regionally without rules of origin. So, hopefully, we'll be able to cross that bridge and move on forward.
The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa says trade within the continent can increase by 26% in 2045, but this can only happen by ensuring an active engagement with the private sector. But there is also a need to focus on inclusive education to boost innovation that leaves no one behind.
Governments must increase their domestic financing in education. Partners must also contribute their share. Bilaterals like banking institutions must also be able to creatively make funding available for such things, because the good of the countries in Africa is the good of everyone else.
And to move forward to where Africa wants to be by 2063, there is the thorny issue of financing the innovations needed.
This is an investment actually in global prosperity. It's not just a question of helping Africans because out of the goodness of our hearts. We have to recognize the need for support. Fragile countries will not succeed without that support. And the 100 billion is a very small amount when we compare it to the 20 trillion that has been disbursed in just 2 years for COVID-19.
In the next 2 days, conversations here at the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development will focus on quality education, gender equality, life below water, life on land, and partnerships. Hopefully the outcome here will not just remain talking points, but will transform into action that will help move the continent forward. From the Kigali Convention Center, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
The resumed fifth session of the UN Environment Assembly has ended with delegates adopting a resolution to pave the way for establishment of a legally binding global treaty by 2024 to end plastic pollution. More than 3,400 in-person and 1,500 virtual participants from 175 UN member states who attended the 3-day Global Environment Forum in Nairobi, Kenya, resolved to back legal tools that would revitalize action on the plastic menace. Proposed by Rwanda, Peru, Japan, and India, the resolution to end plastic pollution took center stage during discussions at the 3-day Global Environment Forum.
Now, clarity on is that we will have a strong global, international, and comprehensive framework on plastic pollution.
We need collective action to develop viable and sustainable substitute for plastics.
Progress on a legally binding global agreement on the plastic pollution is a truly welcome first step to implementation, and it will make a difference, one that shows again the true value of multilateralism.
And finally on the program, it's an entertaining sight in Somalia as the country's capital, Mogadishu, opens its first horse riding stable in decades. Let's take a look.
On a tree-lined and paved road in Somalia's capital, people duck out of their homes to stare in awe at an unusual sight. 2 young men atop white horses racing neck and neck in a training for what will be the city's first horse races in decades. Slowly improving security has fueled demand for sport and leisure activities, and horse riding has proved a hit. Watching the training, mother of 5, Abshira Mohammed, says she was happy to see an activity that inspired young people and entertained parents like her.
This is very interesting. I am very happy to watch this. I encourage them to keep up the horse racing, and I thank him for training the youth and entertaining the parents.
29-year-old Yaya Isse established his stable to offer riding lessons to the public and to eventually host competitions in Mogadishu between riders from the city and from the country's semi-autonomous regions.
In the past, Somalia was famous for horses. Traditionally, Somalis love horses. We are now training youth so that in the near future, we can get Somali teenagers who can participate in horse racing competitions. Our vision is to participate in international horse racing and in big international horse races, such as Arab Cup and Japan Cup. This is a traditional sport loved by our community.
During the era of military dictator Siad Barre, who was toppled in 1991, only police were taught horseback riding, but the new stable, which operates out of the Mogadishu Stadium and is home for 14 horses, has attracted dozens of young Somalis. More than 30 students have completed a 6-month riding course at a stable, and Isse has 8 full-time students currently enrolled, each paying $100 per month.
I want to develop the Somali horse to international standards. In the world, horse races are funded by big companies, and since our country is reviving from numerous setbacks, I am determined to develop horse racing.
Isse says he hopes the government will provide support to grow the stable and develop the sport further in the country.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shobowale. Bye for now.